Hey, on this episode of the Ethics Experts, we talked to the one and only Pat. He runs a really cool NGO and a great organization that helps put best practices into practice within companies to improve their culture of integrity. And he has a really cool background as part of the Mounted Police in Canada, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And there's so many axioms and principles from community policing that he's able to bring into the corporate sphere. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I did.
Welcome to the Ethics Experts, where we're elevating ethics and compliance and HR to the strategic level it's supposed to be.
What's up, my man?
Good day, sir. How are you?
Good, man. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I love your background. Thank you. Finally getting you on the Ethics Experts. Can you imagine?
Yes, I'm excited. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, man. So I always like to kind of start talking about your background. What kind of kid were you? How did you grow up? And how did you get into this?
You mean when I had hair?
Yeah, back when you had hair.
Oh, okay.
What was that like?
Yeah. Well, if you want to start off now, I mean, basically I got 42 years of experience. First part, 35 years as with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, where I did the gamut of work, but specialized initially with drugs and organized crime. And then the latter part of my career was in financial crime, where I was the anti-corruption compliance expert for the RCMP. And
you guys have crime in Canada?
Yes, we do. We don't just apologize and give out maple candy. We do have crime, like in everywhere else in the world. And I joined the RCMP. It sounds cliche, but to make a difference. To make a difference in the world. And I was always focused on prevention, crime prevention, social development, working with the community. Community policing was part of my DNA and part of my ethos. So I did that throughout my career. And it brought me to where I was in charge of the anti-corruption outreach and prevention unit for the RCMP. So I was basically the trainer, for the trainer for our unit that was doing investigation for anti-corruption, international investigation for anti-corruption, and but I was also supporting the investigative units, but part of my role in terms of outreach was to work with companies in terms of preventing, because the corruption investigations are very complex and last years. They could go from 3 to 7 years. So it costs a lot of money. So the RCMP recognized that we need to invest time and money and resources in reaching out to corporations instead of just investigating them, is trying to help them mitigate the risk. So that, you don't have to knock on the door and make arrests and seize documents and all that. So it's much more effective that way. So I was in charge of that unit and trying to be proactive and going to conferences and talking to a lot. I was the lone police officer in conferences, with a bunch of lawyers says, I'm not here to arrest you. It's not just, don't do drugs or don't pay bribes, is really the business case as to why you should have an ethics and compliance program so you don't have to have a visit by my colleagues that do the investigations. Okay? And one of my role actually was to review and assess the rigor of ethics and compliance programs of companies we're investigating.
Okay.
So I could then, you can demonstrate negligence or willful blindness when the program is really bad. So it looks bad from a criminal liability perspective. But then it allowed me to have a really good insights on things. And during that time, I also was invited to be on the committee the ISO committee, the Canadian committee that developed the ISO standard 37001 and 02.
Cool.
Okay, so it gave me that much more broad scope and broad understanding, and it really, became a passion for me.
So when you were going into companies, I want to just go back a little bit.
Yep.
When you're going into companies, what were you looking for to tell if, how rigorous that program was, and what was surprising about that? Because you're kind of doing police work, then you're doing kind of investigative work, and I might be messing this up, and then you're kind of shifting into this kind of preventative work, and now you're helping companies, or you're looking at companies that are under investigation. What kind of stuff was surprising about that shift into the sort of corporate sphere, and what kind of things were you looking at or looking for, I guess, to see this sort of, genuine commitment to prevention?
Yeah, and the commitment is not just, we have the check sheet. Here we have, our compliance program, and here we have our training. I was doing a deep dive as to if it was effective and working. Basically using the EECP as a guide myself, and other best practices to see how the program, if it was effective in the first place. Because remember that for those companies who were investigating, obviously something went wrong.
Right.
Either control.
There was some gap.
Exactly. Something went wrong. And there was either miscommunication, the controls or policies were not applied properly, or, rogue employee, how did they manage to do this? And invariably, you find out that, there's, poor controls or poor monitoring, or it's just a paper tiger that has no teeth. And one in particular I want to share with you where it showed me the total disregard for ethics and compliance, where the company basically, sent me their compliance measures. And I looked it over, and it was obviously that either, the day before when I called them that, to get a copy of it, they went on the internet, took a copy of somebody and just put their name on it. Because when I reviewed it, they didn't even do an edit of the document, because there was reference of the old company that was still there in the document.
Here, just give them something.
But that's just it. So what did it show? As an ethics and compliance professional, what message would that send you when they don't even bother to read the bloody document they sent to the investigative body, and you find a reference to the other company?
It sends a bunch of things. It sends a bunch of messages, right? One is that obviously this is not like a true commitment to it.
Absolutely.
Obviously it is, they're obviously not taking it seriously. I mean, clearly at that level, they didn't see the value in it. Otherwise they presumably would be doing it. So it's like, all right, I got to just like appease this guy who's coming in looking
That's
looking
just
behind
it.
the
They
curtains.
didn't take it seriously. It shows negligence, and from a liability and criminal liability perspective, you go down deeper into that rabbit hole, and you obviously discover that, okay, you guys did not have anything in place to prevent, detect, or mitigate the risk. So guess what? You're done.
Well, I had a conversation recently on the ethics experts, and this woman that I was talking to, her name's Elizabeth, and she was a regulator. And then she kind of came in-house, and she was talking about how, she was very transparent and she was very collaborative with the outside body that, was doing the investigation. And we were talking a little bit about how that can set that investigation on such a totally different track, as opposed to, the cagey kind of an approach, or the approach that says, well, look, we have all this stuff in place. How much worse of a track does it set it on when they say, yeah, we got this stuff in place and it's got another, company's name in it? They clearly don't have that stuff in place.
Of course.
So it changes the entire tenor of your investigation, because
it does.
I talk about this all the time, but when a regulatory body comes in, or an auditor comes in, or an investigation is happening by an outside party, they're not just looking for like hard data points. They're also looking for sort of soft data points, which are like, have you thought about this? How do you as an organization, or you as a representative of the organization, think about this? Like, you're trying to feel out what the commitment is, because, when I was in financial services, we would do kind of audits, or even when I'm on the other side of an audit, when our external auditors are coming in to audit our financial statements, part of that is the review of the controls that are in place. And like, there's always going to be gaps. And I have found, when I can convey to them that, like, yes, I understand that's a gap. These are the things that we're doing to like mitigate that gap, or these are the sort of secondary controls that are in place, or, hey, we've looked at this and this is really an immaterial risk for reasons X, Y, and Z. You can feel their whole like demeanor change, and you can feel the anxiety kind of drop because they start to feel like, okay, I'm talking to somebody that looks at the world the same way. We have the same goals. We're not trying to like defraud each other or whatever. And that audit turns into a much more kind of collaborative relationship on how we can improve the system that's in place. And I think it's a big gap for folks.
Yeah. And, my role and my focus was not to scare people into doing the right thing. Okay. Because just using the big stick, it doesn't work. I mean, look, the reality is, law enforcement agencies have limited resources and limited time. Okay. And it's much more effective if you engage that target audience, the businesses. I'm not dealing with the Hells Angels here, okay, or criminal organization. Although some people can act like those, within an environment, okay, but they're not traditionally the vast majority of people want to do the right thing, but many times they just don't know how, or they don't take it seriously enough. Okay, so it's about how they view the risk, and it's a risk benefit calculation a lot of people make. But in the last 10 years, you have to admit that things have evolved greatly. Most organizations understand that working ethically, having a compliance program is actually good for business. It provides this security. It protects the reputation, but it also increases profitability when it's done right. Okay, so they've recognized that. But when I first started, it was the big enforcement aspect, and you need to do it. But especially SMEs were underserved. Okay, and they were part of the supply chain. So this is where I started. When I was in the RCMP in charge of that unit, I actually started my NGO that I still run with a colleague of mine, the Canadian Centre of Excellence for Anti-Corruption. So it's an NGO that was associated with a university to be able to help, especially SMEs, any organization, but especially SMEs, find information, best practices, lessons learned, and aggregate it into a toolbox, but basic on collective action. So it's not just me, the RCMP, but it's multi-agency, multi-sectorial. So bringing in large organizations, academic, students even, into the fray so that we can send the right message and allow SMEs to have access to, tailored or information or best practices or documents that they don't have time to search for, because when you go on Google and you ask for this, it's just too hard to find. So that's where it motivated me, because I wanted at that time a national hub for Canadian companies to access. But then it grew from there, because with our external affairs people, I was invited to go to different countries to export that model. So one of the things I do with the center, and it's an NGO, I go to developing countries and help them build their own capacity to prevent, investigate, and prosecute corruption and financial crime. That's part of what I do. Okay? Right. So giving back from that perspective, because it's good when you increase the capacity of those countries where that, from traditionally where it's high risk for corruption, if you can increase their capacity, it's good for everybody. So that was my giving back hat. So I continued that after I retired from the RCMP in 2017, and then I started also with a business partner, a small boutique firm, the active compliance and ethics group, to be able to help companies with the information, with the experience, the unique skills they have, to bring a little bit of a different look and different feel of how to improve their ethics, compliance, anti-corruption program, how to assess it, because of what we were bringing to the table. And now working with AI, how do you implement AI to be able to increase that? So with 42 years of experience, I should be retired playing golf, playing with my grandkids, but I love this. This is a passion of mine. Just like you and a lot of people in our field, we want to make a difference, but the only way to do that is really to connect with people. So I'm bringing all this experience from a community development, community policing perspective that has real life connection to the corporate world as well.
So when you think about the community policing perspective and you think about the NGO that you formed, what kind of principles did you pull from that thing? Because that community policing, to your point, is all of this kind of preventative tactics, right? How did you pull from that? Like, what are some of those foundational principles that were really kind of undergirding and underpinning this approach to this NGO? Because if I'm understanding correctly, this NGO is really kind of a center of excellence or kind of a think tank that kind of pulls together all these best practices so someone doesn't have to go ahead and reinvent the wheel. Exactly. They can really accelerate up the J-curve of implementing and embedding a strong program that helps stamp out, bad actions, let's call it.
Yeah, trying to, to answer that, you don't have an excuse not to do it. Here's a
toolbox.
Here's a toolbox. But it's not just that. And if you don't mind me just expanding on it a little bit,
yeah, please.
Is that this is about collective action. So asking the larger firms or those firms that have already gone through this, have had, bad experiences, and sharing their stories. Because it's not just about reading a white paper.
Yeah, good point.
It doesn't resonate with people. It's much more effective if, I had a large mining company, Barrick Gold, that basically provided us their entire ethics and compliance and anti-corruption program so that we could share it with their junior and SMEs. Why? Why is that important for them? Because they're part of the supply chain. Many of the smaller companies, what do they want? They want to be part of their JV. They want to be part of the supply chain of the larger ones. Or it's in mining or extractive industry, they want to be bought out. Well, if they have too many skeletons in their closet, if they don't have an ethics and compliance program that's rigorous, they're not going to be bought out because the successor liability, it increases their liability. They don't, especially in today's business environment, they don't want to be associated with that. So by having these real stories, having these other people being part of that collective action, it brings real stories and real practical information, not just theoretical stuff. That's part of what we're trying to offer. And from a policing perspective, just to answer your question, there's two major train of thoughts or principles that we use in community policing. So it's crime prevention, so social development, and crime prevention through environmental design. So CPSD, crime prevention, social development, is about building a relationship with the community. The only way to deal with issues, risk, problems, crime, is to work with the community to be able to identify and help them build the capacity to prevent and mitigate it. Because police officers are not everywhere.
It's kind of relationship building at that level.
It's relationship building. It's building capacity, but building trust.
Yeah.
So training them. You've heard of community groups, prevention groups in various communities. Okay, where it works. They have different groups that work with the police. Well, it's going beyond that, where you try to build not just communication trust, but you help them identify the red flags when there's either crime, drugs, gangs, or other,
So let's dive into specifics on that. What's a story that goes along with that? That's a real kind of a good representation of this community policing through social development. It's a group in a particular community that what kind of a group is it? And how do you interact with them? And what kinds of red flags would you hope that this group can sort of raise to you through the pathway that's been established from that social development?
Well, there's one program in particular. I was involved in multitude of programs that developed nationally and locally when I was in the RCMP. So I was one of the trainers for that. And one of the things that I remember best is in local community here in Ottawa that was known for crime infestation and drugs and all that. And so we partnered up with the local police, so the RCMP, which is the federal police, partnered up with the local police, the Ottawa police, and then worked and identified the champions within the community themselves.
And how? So how did you do that?
We reached out to existing groups existing business development, business improvement groups, the local politicians, local activists over there. So we just got them together, and we basically had a town hall.
Okay.
And saying, this is the project that we want to do with you. Okay. And the only way we're going to do it is if we do it together. Here's what our role is, how we're going to be able to provide you information, tools, but we're going to be supporting you. And this is what we would like from you if you're okay with it. Because first you need to assess what the problem is. It's not just going in and say, oh yeah, we're the police, we know what the problem is, let us do. No, it's about assessment of the risk, assessment of the problems. So because sometimes, Nick, it's about perception, not just reality.
Yeah,
because we have
totally.
statistics, okay, about crime, about reporting, about investigation, conclusion, but it's really about how people are feeling.
Right.
How are they really perceiving their sense of security, their sense of how policing is responding to issues? So getting really good picture, a root cause analysis of things, having good assessment of things. So then we can devise a plan. This is what we did. We had community groups. We had one that was called CARD, Community in Action to Reduce Drugs, because drugs was a major issue. Okay. And so we developed acronym in different ways where we train people to do, patrols, never alone, with the radio from the community policing office. So, and then we partnered up with the city, with the fire department, with community housing, with inspectors, where at that time we identified the drug dens. And then working with the bank, in one in particular, that we actually got recognized for that at the international level, where the house was a drug den owned by a drug dealer. He inherited it from his mother, and it was awful. I mean, it was just awful in the neighborhood. Well, we kept having different types of approaches and strategies with them, but brought in the bank because they still had a mortgage on the house. Well, in a mortgage, if you do illegal activity, they can repossess your house.
Right.
And then we became, we were active in working with them, and we became the agent of the bank and the owners of some property, where we could knock on the door and say, oh, hi, I'm now the representative of the owner. You have 7 days to vacate because you're a drug dealer. Here's the proof. We don't just go in there willy-nilly. We have the proof. We have observation. We have months and months of investigation.
Substantiated data points.
Exactly, because the owners of these properties were afraid to act themselves. So we were then becoming their partner. And in the one that I was telling you, the bank repossessed it. So, but instead of just, because for years we do, you do warrants. Totally. Yeah, but
this is another angle.
Revolving door.
Totally.
It's evolving. So we're looking at different way of looking at the problem and different solutions that had more impact in community, and then the community takes it back.
Yeah. So, thanks for sharing that. I mean, there's just so many parallels, obviously, between what you're talking about and how a compliance officer or how a compliance program can really drive change.
Exactly.
I mean, you said so many important things there, right? It's about doing it together. It's not coming in with the batons and the warrants, but rather understanding from a root cause analysis perspective, like what's actually happening and how can we get creative about actually fixing the problem, as opposed to just putting more police on the street, for example, right?
Exactly.
It's getting that buy-in from those champions in the community. You figured out a way to find these champions and really engage them in a process and build the trust that allowed the community policing to really activate these human sensors, I guess.
And then it's the communities themselves that take charge afterwards. They have ownership of it. Just like any company, the role of ethics and compliance, or to be ethical or to have a moral compass, is not just the ethics and compliance officers of their office. Everybody has a role to make sure that things are done ethically within an organization. Same thing in the community. So if you empower them, if you provide them, the tools, but if you build the trust, and that's the key. Because if the police is just seen as the big bad guys coming in with a baton, well, there's not going to be trust. And you're not going to have the intelligence to be able to react to crisis or problems. Because people are not going to provide or use the whistleblowing line or call the police if they see something, if they don't trust the system, if they don't trust the process. Okay? So that's where the lessons are learned. And this is where that experience can be transferred to a corporate setting. Also, with a crime prevention through environmental design, this is more structural. It's about the controls, it's about the policies. It's about the environment and the physicality of things. How are people feeling? What type of control and policies are you putting in place? Is it just for show, or is it actually effective? Is it deterring and preventing things effectively or not? So those principles are the same in a corporate environment than in a crime prevention environment as well. When you put lights on, when you remove the graffiti, when you facilitate the walkabout, or
making sure that people are going from one place to another. That there's not a bunch of broken windows in the neighborhood.
Exactly. It has a huge impact on the perception and the culture of that neighborhood. The same thing applies to a corporate setting. If you build those infrastructures, it's not just responding with a policy or a control or a new law.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Okay. It's about, what are you trying to achieve? What's the goal? And do you want to change behavior?
I mean, how crazy is it that police organizations have been doing stuff like this for so long, and yet it's, we are where we're at in the timeline, and compliance teams, ethics teams are reinventing these wheels. And
yes.
It's at the end of the day, you said it yourself. It's all about building trust, and it's about influencing behavior to start to, air out and, evaporate away some of the wrongdoing that's going on in whatever the community is. You know what I'm saying? How crazy is that? How crazy is it that there are these principles that are highly successful across the world, right? It's happening in Canada. It's happening in all these well-developed companies or countries. And yet we haven't borrowed from those. So I guess that's where you come in to make that connection. It's mind-boggling to me, because I think, in a community, everyone shares a zip code, right?
Yes.
In an organization, everyone shares the same name on the paycheck.
Yes.
It should be easier to some degree to affect it, I think.
But people are looking at things very from an individualist perspective.
100%.
They live in their house. My fence is my. I don't care what's happening in my neighbor. I don't care until something happens that affects you. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now that is about the community you built. But you've got other neighborhoods. You look at environmental decay, or if there's a tornado or something happens, and you see everybody come out of there and helping each other.
Right.
Okay. So it all depends on the circumstances and how people are situated in their mind and how safe they feel coming out and doing it.
Yeah, and how much connectedness they feel.
Exactly. So if you build a community that's interconnected, where the elderly neighbor is watched over by the entire community,
and they're shoveling their driveway,
they're shoving their driveway, or they're looking out for the kids that are walking away from school and say, "Hey, Johnny, make sure that you get home." You still have that. That still exists.
Well, that's a human thing.
But that's just it. But we need to emphasize that and promote that even more from a community perspective, and transfer that mentality to a corporate perspective. I was involved in developing programs to help parents intern prevention for drugs and gangs. Okay. It's about building assets. Okay. Building resiliency for the kids. Well, the same thing needs to be done from a corporate perspective.
Right.
Ethical and compliance resiliency with employees. How do you build that? How do you measure that? And how do you do this from a corporate perspective, that where you build that trust? Because if you have that that connection, you're more likely to have good employees, retain and attract good employees, less fraud, and more likely for people to raise their hand because they will trust the system. The speak up and listen up culture type of.
Well, yeah, and where it's not just about me, it's about us or something.
Exactly. And so those lessons are learned because at the core of it, whether it's in community or in a company, it's about human behavior and human connectedness. Christian Hunt is really, really good at this.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Okay? Behavioral analysis, that's part of what I did as an investigator. And it's applying those principles. They're commonsensical at the core,
right.
Nick. They're very commonsensical. But people tend to want to put it in a box. Oh, let's just have a checklist that says, oh yeah, it's good. You can't do that with ethics and compliance. It's about behavior. It's about your moral compass, about values. But if people don't feel safe within a community or a corporate environment, why should they care? Because you need to answer two very important questions to engage people. Why should I care? And how is it going to help me in my job? Okay. Why should I care about this? Usually sometime in training, why should you give a shit? Why should you really care about this?
Right.
Because you're part of that community, that corporate community or that community where you live. And then how is it going to help me as a citizen feel more safe in my community? Well, if you stand and never go out, never talk to people and yell at kids whenever they're in the street, guess what? They won't care about you.
Right.
But if you get engaged and involved, you don't have to go every night to PTAs. You just have to be engaged and involved and talk to your neighbors and see what's happening. So that now if you see a car that you've never seen before, a behavior you've never seen before, there's a red flag. Who do you call?
Yeah,
How do you know?
Because it's a pattern interrupt then, right? Exactly. It's something's out of place,
Exactly. And same thing in corporate setting.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. If you don't train your people, if you don't provide them the right tool, if they don't feel safe to report, why should they? Why should they care? Because the corporate entity doesn't care about you. Same thing within a community. Because let's be clear, I was very proud of my 35 years as an RCMP officer. Did I make mistakes? Tons of them, yes. But I associated myself with the same type of mentality, share the same values in terms of community policing. But you and I have seen it, and others have seen it, whether in corporate or community, bad police officers or bad public servants, same thing, okay? Within an organization. If you have bad leadership, if you have people that create this toxic environment, well, people are not going to trust the system.
Right.
So thus, you're more likely to have problems and more likely for the risk to explode into something that is essential to the organization.
So when you're doing this community policing, it sounds like you had a similar playbook, but it sounds also like the actual recipe of what was actually done was probably very different from one case to the next case. Is that true?
Totally. Because you need to assess every problem, has its unique modus operandi, unique DNA, and you have to look at the entirety of the context, who you're dealing with. You have to have cultural awareness. You have to have awareness of the situation. When first responders are trusted for their experience, and especially in times of crisis, look what we're facing today in today's environment, geopolitical environment. Okay? Yeah. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of uncertainty. So what people are looking for is leadership that they can trust. They can navigate this uncertainty. How are you going to be able to come out of it? What lessons can you learn from it? How can you survive this? The same thing happens within community. Look at COVID. Okay, those companies, a lot of them went down the drain for a multitude of reasons. But even the small mom and pop shop, those that were resilient, those that had really great roots within community, had good leadership and good relationship with their employees, are the ones that survived more readily because they built in resiliency. But they also had the mindset of adapting to the situation, to crisis on a dime. So they weren't just, crazy in fear. They had the wherewithal to say, okay, how do we adapt to that? So they adapted to remote work. They adapted to the internet for ordering their goods or services. Those are the ones that survived because they were resilient. They could do that. Same thing with a corporation in terms of the uncertainty that we find today. How resilient, if they have a really good infrastructure, if they've got a good foundation of ethics and they have a good culture, they're more likely to be able to adapt to those circumstances, mitigate the risk, manage those risks more readily because people are engaged and involved to the success of that organization.
Yeah, and they believe in it.
Exactly. They care about it because the corporation, asked me and they value what I do and what I produce or what I contribute. So in a moment of crisis, I'm there to say, I've got an idea here. Because the idea doesn't just come from the senior management. It comes from the people on the ground. They're doing it every day.
They know what's going on. They know which streetlights are out. They know where's the graffiti or where the drug den is or whatever, Yeah, you can't come in as a police officer and a person of authority or as a leader, middle managers or senior leader, and say, I've got the solution for you. I want you to do it this way. Well, are you even aware of the reality of the situation? And how do you get the buy-in then if they're not even participating in the solution,
Exactly. So those are lessons learned that I've applied now to, the corporate world.
And, something else, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's always champions. There's always people that are going to show up to that town hall.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? There's always people inside the organization, even if you don't feel like you have that resiliency, or even if you don't feel like the culture of integrity is at the level that you want it to be.
Yep.
There's always people that are just wired that way, that they want to do the right thing, or they want to leave it better, or they, want to make a difference. And, that's where we got to spend the time. That's the fertile soil to drive change, because those people inherently are change makers. You know what I mean?
They are change makers. And at one point, that organization, if they keep maintaining toxic culture, they're going to lose them. Okay, let's be clear, because they don't 100%. Want to stay there.
But sometimes someone's going to move out of the neighborhood.
Absolutely. Yeah. But on the flip side, I've got a story to share with you where we went into this large multinational, warrant and everything, and we went into the assistant, the corporate assistant of her office, and the first thing she said, because when we do these type of seizures, it's long, it's arduous, there's a lot of paperwork. You need to seize the information from the computers, and it's weeks and months to try to figure out, the
what's what. You got to kind of put the case together, right?
It is onerous. Okay, lots of time. In this situation, we went in, and the secretary or the assistant said, "Thank God, it's about time you're here." I've never heard that before. So she opened her desk and she gave us a big USB key. She had, because she was the assistant of the CEO, she had witnessed all of the malfeasance, but because of personal situation, she couldn't get out of it. Okay, no judgment passed at all. But for her moral compass to say, this is wrong. This is wrong. And she was just waiting. It's going to blow up. I knew it was going to blow up one day. Okay, I just knew it. So she gave us this. She had basically taken and copied all of the information and gave us the roadmap right there. Right. Now, it's only happened once in my career, but let's just say that it's illustrative of that person within the corporation that has a moral compass that was just stuck. Invariably, at one point, they're going to raise their hand.
Right.
Okay, so if you continue in the same path, you may be successful a year, 2 years, 3 years. That's fine. But somebody's going to raise their hand, and then it's going to be
someone's seen it. But very few things are done in total isolation. There's always some, there's always someone who's been a party to it or has witnessed it or whatever, Yeah.
And for me, it's all of these cases allowed me to have a very deep dive and understanding of what went wrong and what's the best way to mitigate this. So it gave me a unique hindsight of what, much more than just,
right.
what you see from a, from decision from the court. I had the chance to be there. So it gives me, unique set of experience and skills that I'm bringing to the table now that allows me to make a difference and continue my quest to make a difference, but from a different perspective.
Yeah, because it's not just about like, okay, great, we took all these best practices and we took this, now great, here's a binder, here's a toolbox. It's not just that; it's actually implementing it and ultimately changing the behavior. That's what we're ultimately after.
Yeah, and a lot of the cases that didn't go to court. What I started was proactive prevention. So those cases that usually just are filed somewhere, I called them. I interacted with them, advised them that we had a file open. And of course, you have the automatic reactions. Oh my God, the RCMP is calling me and they say they have a file on me. Right. Panic. Says, no, relax. I'm going to go in and show you what we've got to help you mitigate so it doesn't happen again. Okay. Because right now we're not going to charge you, but if you don't mitigate it, there's going to be consequences to it down the road. So I went in there not just to show them and whap them on the figure. It says, here's the problem that we saw, okay? And because of the training, the part of the ISO and just the experience, I provided them tools and avenues and documents and a list of free or almost free resources. The lawyers hated me in conferences because they were promoting their services, and here it was.
Work,
You can go to them and pay a huge amount of money, or have this list. Now you can have it validated by them, but here's a list of free or almost free, best practices you can implement. Because honestly, the SMEs didn't have the money to go to the big firms,
or the resources, or the
resources,
or the expertise. Whatever.
But that's just it. So I gave those companies these tools and said, I would recommend that you apply these lessons. And then I told them, says, if it happens in a year, 2 years, 3 years on the road, that we investigate you again, I'll be the first witness to say, I was there on this date, giving them the
solution,
the solutions, and they did nothing with it. Guess what's going to happen with the judge?
It's going to look a lot worse than coming from a place of ignorance is very different than coming from a place of like, I don't care about it.
So that's where I come in now, and it's not about scaring people. You need to wake them up to the reality, because unfortunately, especially SMEs, are not as aware as they should be of their risk profile.
Yeah, right? That's probably right.
They just don't have time or the resources for it. So it's trying to help them identify and really conduct their risk profile so that they can prevent and mitigate it. And as well as I do today that there's a lot of resources out there. And it doesn't have to cost an arm and a leg to be able to implement something that's worthwhile and that's effective. Of course, you do it by tier, and it's all risk-based, but it's at least doing something, getting on the path to the right direction. And that's where from the advisory, this is where we're situated. We need to help those companies, especially the SMEs, to change the way they think, because they're part of that big supply chain now. Okay,
right.
And the requirements and the liability is much higher today, and especially with the Gen Zs and Gen X that are much less likely to accept unethical behavior. So they're much more likely to raise their hand either on social media or to regulators. So the reality today is that you're facing much more higher risk of detection than 10 years ago. Right. So you can't afford not to do this anymore. And by the way, it's going to increase your profitability and your ability to mitigate risk and fraud and everything else. And you're going to be, you give them the business case, the ROI for it. And many of them connect with that, because it's not just about saying it's illegal. It's what's the business advantage? What's the business case of being ethical, of being compliant?
Yeah, it's not just defense, it's offense.
Exactly. Exactly. And how can you apply now AI to help you do this?
Yeah. Let's talk about that thing, because, It's kind of all over the place. It's like we're in the Wild West right now with AI, and it's maybe just getting, maybe it's, it seems like it's just kind of getting started. So talk to me a little bit about like your work on, your work around this topic, where you're seeing people kind of fall flat, like what these sort of gaping
holes.
Yeah. What are these gaping holes that people are really introducing themselves to a lot of risk on the one hand, or what are the gaping holes in terms of people not using it to the extent that they could or should to really move the needle from a risk mitigation perspective,
Right. Well, I mean, you've seen the pace of technological development. The AI is just like it's changing every couple of weeks. You get something new,
totally.
As opposed
like,
to from
really new. Like
totally new. Where, just 5 years ago, it was waiting every 6 months for new hardware or new chips. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
Now it's every 2 weeks. So it's hard even to keep up. Okay. I'm a tech geek. I'm geeking out on this stuff, and I have trouble myself to keep up. Okay. So imagine the CEO that doesn't have time. Okay. And they're looking at this as, now, I've got to get on the bandwagon. So the big reaction, shiny object. I must say that I have AI somewhere, somehow. So they're rushing into this morass of this big, huge machine of, I need to have AI without a plan, without knowing how they're going to use it, how they're going to deploy it, if it's going to be effective, it's going to blow up in their face or not. So there's a lot of misunderstanding about AI, first of all. And some of them automatically, they have their reaction. Let's ban it. I don't want anybody to use it. Guess what? Every single person in your office is using it somehow on their phone. Okay. Because why? Because they're under pressure to perform. They need to write this report or do this analysis. God, if I do this with ChatGPT or Perplexity, I can do it in 20 minutes instead of 20 hours.
Yeah.
Guess what? They're going to use it.
They're naturally going to use it. 100%.
But that's just it. Why? Because if it's used properly, if it's deployed properly with the right governance, the right parameters, and you teach your people how, it's like it's a new tool. It's software. Let's be clear. It's a piece of software, but it's transformative because it's going to turn you into a battery in 10 years if you don't do it right. So it's really important for people to understand the benefits, but also the dangers around it, the challenges with it, because the transformation of it can increase your productivity, your efficiency, not just by 10%, by 40, 50, 60% in use cases. So it's absolutely a game changer, but you can't rush into it. And that's what a lot of people are doing is that, I'm going to buy this, I'm going to buy that. And there's a lot of over-promising and under-delivering by a lot of service providers as well. You got legacy systems or providers that say, I'll just put an AI agent on top of it and call it AI. No, that's not going to work.
Right. Or
look at agentic AI today. You've got Gemini, you've got Copilot, Microsoft that is taking over. You can create your own agents with Copilot now if you've got the enterprise. Yeah, but that's fine. You can test it, but do you have the wherewithal to actually build it properly? Do you have
you have the wherewithal to actually monitor the outputs?
But that's just it. Because for me, it's transformative. The technology is evolving, but I equate AI to a genius teenager or college students on drugs, meaning huge amount of energy, smart as hell. But would you trust it with your daughter or your son or with strategic direction or driving your car? No, you would not. You need to have the adult in the room. You need to have supervision. You need to check the output because it doesn't have the experience, the wherewithal, the cognitive ability to make the right decision all the time.
Yeah, and it doesn't have the context.
Exactly. So the technology is evolving leaps and bounds. It's scary sometimes to see. So having this in mind is how do you guide organizations to adopt it properly, to adopt it effectively? So it does have the benefits and you can contain or manage the risk much more effectively.
Yeah, I kind of see folks kind of erring on, one side or the other.
Yeah.
Sort of do whatever or don't do anything with AI.
And in today's environment, with the mountains of data that you have to go through, you would be remiss and negligent if you don't use technology.
I agree.
Okay? Because if you look at risk management, what did we do in the past? We had Excel sheets and we did audits. Okay, we looked at it. We hoped to God that we could find a needle in the haystack. Okay, and then we found it. Great. But it's what, 2%, 4%, 5%. Now with technology, you can evaluate and monitor the entire data set and have predictive analytics to actually look in terms of pattern and recognition to see, something may be coming up later, not now, but there's an analogous, there's some behavior that is not right, or there's anomalies in transaction that could cause some problems. You couldn't do that in the past because you didn't have time. You didn't have the resources. It cost too much. The cost of compliance has now been reduced, so you can do more with less if it's deployed properly. And that's the game changer. And it's accessible to SMEs as with large organization. But it's just how you're doing it. How do you trust it? Because when you look at vendors, are you asking the right questions in terms of explainability, in terms of governance, in terms of making sure that it doesn't blow up? Look at what happened with Air Canada with their bot.
Yeah, I don't know about it. What happened?
Air Canada.
Was this with the price, the ticket prices?
Yes, the price, exactly.
Yeah. Tell the story though, because this is crazy.
So the story about Air Canada. Air Canada is obviously the largest airline in Canada. So they initiated and implemented a chatbot on their website. So people, of course, it's nice and easy instead of looking through all the text. And this person had a family member die, and usually you have discount for bereavement on for plane tickets. So he went on the chatbot, says, do I need to submit the paperwork for the bereavement for the death, to proof of death before and after? So the chatbot came back, so no, you can do it after. So bought the ticket, blah blah blah, and he submitted after for a discount, didn't get it. No, it's against policy. Wait, your chatbot told me that I could get it. He went to court and won.
Yeah,
because Air Canada, although they bought this chatbot from a supplier, are responsible for the output of anything that. Yeah,
it was a representative of the company.
Exactly. Right. So it shows you how important that governance, how you deploy, how you test it. Okay, I mean this is an outlier, but it's also representative of how you rush into the adoption of AI without proper testing.
Yeah, and I mean, so what do you think it is? Is it a question of them just not having thought through what the implications of the bot were, or like where it could go wrong? Well, because I mean, there's so much to think about. You know what I'm saying? Like where was the miss in that situation?
Well, usually LLMs are not supposed to create new policies. Okay, agentic AI can create workflows and thinking and and reasoning. Okay, but but
it's like it's a function of something that exists.
That's right, because a chatbot feeds on a RAG, your own document, your own policies. So, right. But this one had a glitch because it invented something outside of the parameters that was feeding it on.
Yeah. And so like, how do you even test for that? Right. Especially if to your point, I mean, it's this sort of overpromise, under deliver thing, right? How do you test for that? If you're like, well, I was told, or I was, I'm sure when they put that in place, they didn't think there was any sort of risk at all of what having happened or what happening. Hello.
Can you test for everything? No, you can't test for everything. But the thing is, I can only assume, and I'm just conjecturing here, that they didn't do the right amount of testing for the output, because they thought, they're just feeding off our document, so it's not going to invent anything. So the algorithm, and now you have specific ways of testing that.
Yeah, and I think there's new layers of control in place.
Exactly.
To, double check whatever the response is, or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, people are learning every day from mistakes of others. Okay, but let's just say that for the ethics and compliance function, it is so complex. Our role, our responsibility is complex. We don't have a lot of resources. We don't have a lot of time. But adopting this type of technology allows us the ability to have a dashboard and a complete picture of everything that's around. And then being able to have a dashboard that's specific to the use case or the end user. So although it may analyze the same type of data, you can create and generate automated report to your board, to your senior managers, to your middle managers, or to the AP clerk. Okay, in real time, because we saw something here, we saw something there, and you didn't have that capacity in the past. Now you do, but it's how you deploy it, how you manage it, and how you train your people.
How do we get so? On the one hand, there's a whole list of caveats and warnings about not deploying it with the proper governance. How do we balance that against the opportunity that it presents? Because you just gave 5 or 6 different use cases.
Oh, there's tons of them, tons.
Which is particularly valuable for departments that are largely viewed as cost centers, that are, never have enough resources, that are always kind of pushing a string up the hill to get more budget and stuff like that. Like, how do we help folks who maybe are standing on the edge of the pool, or maybe just have their feet in the pool? How do we get them to jump into the pool without fear of drowning, so to speak?
Well, first, they need to increase their AI literacy, not to become like geeks like you or me, okay? Yeah. But at least understand, what is this tool? How is it going to improve my work or meet my objectives, my KPIs, my mission, okay? In what way? And who do I trust? What type of questions do I need to ask from the service providers to make sure that they have all the ducks in place, that it's aligned with the EU AI Act or other regulation, because it's still in fluid right now.
Totally,
but
yeah.
What I recommend to anybody, always go to the top tier, okay? Aim to align yourself to whatever the best. Yeah, will it take a little more time? Yes, but less likely to blow up in your face if you do that.
Totally.
If you just go to the minimum standard, the technology is evolving so quickly.
It ain't
by
gonna
the
stay
time
the
you apply
minimum
it, you're
long,
going to be way out of the circus. So it's really important but it's continuous monitoring. But it's like anything that you have. But what's the beauty of it is that you can have now an agent that monitors that for you as well.
Yeah, right. Right. I mean, that's a phenomenal point.
That's just it. So
it's like a built-in seatbelt.
Exactly. So those digital assistants can be tailored for a specific function or specific use case. And then you have an orchestration, meaning a supervisor that does this. Yeah. So you have 3 tier of agentic AI. I'm not going to, we could talk for an hour on just that. But anyway, so you can have, because it's less likely when you have an agentic AI that's specific to a function to have hallucination or to have mistakes, because it's very, very precise. It's very close to one specific function and one set of data set. Okay.
So my gosh, we got to have you back, man. We got to have
so
you
much
back
fun.
For this.
It's
I
so
know.
much fun.
I mean, it's like the new frontier. It's this thing that can be so transformative, not just for our own work and not spending time doing non-value add things, but it can have so much of an impact on ultimately the behavior that we're trying to
and how you use it, to help train people, to ask questions. When people at the business development, says, okay, I've got a question about, I'm going to this country or that country. Your AI can actually, when you're asking for your permission for travel expenses, come in. Oh, Nick, you're going to Ghana for this business. Oh, by the way, here's a 30-second clip on Ghana, what you need to remember about corruption, what you may be facing. And here's a policy on gift and entertainment for that country. So instead of you having to look at it, read it, go to a PDF, no, it's telling you what, where, how, in chunks that is relatable to you,
digestible, influenceable,
that's specific to you, that's tailored to you. That's the beauty of it. So now more people are more likely to say, oh, I'm going to listen to it. It's 30 seconds. Yeah, no problem. I can do this. Oh, yeah, it's a reminder. Shit, yeah, I got to do this.
Yeah, and you're not going to go back and listen to the freaking hour-long gifts and entertainment training. You know what I mean?
And on the phone, they can ask, what's the amount for given payment again? Oh, okay, it's this. They don't spend 15 minutes trying to go through the PDF form. No, it
because
tells you
what
right
they're going
away.
to do is they're just going to do whatever.
Exactly.
Otherwise, you know what I mean?
If you facilitate, make it easy for people to make the right decision, they're more likely to do it.
That's right. That's right. It's about making, it's what you just said. It's about making doing the right thing easier.
Exactly.
And sometimes, you kind of talked about this earlier. It's like, do you take it serious and do you care about doing the right thing? I think most people do care about doing the right thing. And do they take it serious is almost kind of doesn't matter if they don't know about it. You know what I'm saying? If they don't know the detail of the gifts and entertainment policy, for example, they might want to do the right thing, but they don't know what that information is.
Yeah. And ultimately, when you build that culture, it's also how do you incentivize? How do you recognize people for doing the right thing? You have the bonus for making the numbers or extra numbers. And, some I get some pushback sometimes. So why should we give a bonus or recommend for something that people should do automatically? Doing the right thing automatically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, supposed to. Yeah. Tell me, let's talk about human behavior. Okay. For the next 30 minutes, and I'll explain to you why. With 35 years as a police officer, there's a problem here in terms of, the fraud triangle, in terms of, the motivation, the pressure, the rationalization. It's easy to rationalize things. But what, let me ask you something, Nick. In most of the large scandals that we've had in the past, what is the underlying factor that is common to all in terms of those illegal, immoral, unethical behavior that's occurred?
I think there was like a dollar motivation usually.
Yeah.
There's an incentive thing and a culture that allowed it. Yeah.
The culture, if you look at most of these scandals are based on a toxic culture or the culture that allowed or promoted or willful blindness to unethical behavior.
Right.
Okay. So that culture element is key to any organization because that's a foundation. Okay?
Yeah.
But too many people looking at it's fluff. No, it's foundational.
It's the foundation.
It's a foundation of the organization. If people feel that there's going to be repercussion for sexual harassment or something, and there's institutional organizational justice to it, where you've seen some scandals, don't have to name them, but where the CEO was turfed for breaking the code of ethics because they had a relationship with their underling. Well, if that happens to CEO for something like this, that means that company is serious about the code of ethics.
That's right.
Okay, so that is intrinsic.
Well, it sends such a message of like what matters and what doesn't matter because there's so much noise. Pat, I gotta have you back on something in the ethics verse or back on here to talk some more. I have such a good time with you, man, and you're just like so passionate. You're such a wealth of knowledge. Where can people find you, find out more about you, and more about your organization?
One is the Active Compliance and Ethics Group. So it's activecomplianceadvisory.com. That's the advisory boutique shop where we help organization. And then my baby NGO, which is the Canadian Center of Excellence for Anti-Corruption. So I wear two hats because, again, with the CAC, the NGO is about giving back. Yeah. And it's associating with people like you that want to contribute their knowledge also to share with others. So at one point, I'll be coming back to say, how can we share and collaborate on this stuff? Because it's how do we change that mentality, make it easier for SMEs? And because you guys got amazing resources. I mean, your middle manager kit, superb.
Thank you.
I don't need to recreate the wheel. And that's the beauty of it. This is here. Go there.
Well,
check it there.
That's the beautiful part about this community that we're a part of. We're all trying to make the world a better place. And when we can share more of our tactics and our strategies and our resources, I think it can do a lot.
Yeah. And we've talked about it, when in Boston or Washington, it's a unique environment in the ethics and compliance field. We may be competitors in one sense, but we're much more open and in sharing best practices. there's not a lot of professions where we openly say, yeah, I'm going to help you with this.
Right.
Okay. Because it's about ethics and compliance.
Right.
It's about making that difference.
It's something that's above the competitive
absolutely
landscape,
and, and believe me, it's like death and taxes. Corruption and unethical behavior will happen all the time. So there's going to be work for all of us. There's no problem with that. But it's how you approach things. You can't be, the big stick, the big police officer, the big leader that is just ordering people
by fear.
Oh
all
my
that.
God.
Yeah, we need
by fear.
we need
never
the authentic
works.
buy-in. Yeah,
exactly. So, but sometimes they just need, what's the best way to approach this? I want to do the right thing, but I'm not sure how. And this is where we come in and share those best practices.
Yeah. And
see where we can come up with it. But listen, I have always a great time talking to you. I'd love to come back to either, Ethisphere or podcast, webcast, whatever. I'm
awesome.
Good.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us on the Ethics Experts. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Nick. Always a pleasure.